Courage, strength, perseverance, compassion. These words barely begin to describe the essence of a woman whose efforts made a striking difference in the lives of so many. As a pioneer of this country's credit union movement, she was the embodiment of its philosophy. Hers was a labor of love, fueled by a fierce desire to achieve economic justice for all. Diminutive only in size, her endless compassion for human nature remains a model for others to emulate. She was born Louise on September 20th, 1909, to Joseph and Julia McCarran on a small farm near Wilmington, Ohio. One of 6 Irish Catholic children, her heritage directed her outspokenness about politics and the economy. These traits were recognizable throughout her life. Following an early education in a one-room schoolhouse, Louise began her independent life in Columbus, working as a housekeeper to finance her way through secretarial school. Dissatisfied with the options available to women at the time, she ventured to the University of Cincinnati School of Engineering, where she studied accounting. Fresh out of college in 1932, she found employment with the Cincinnati-based Kroger Company, a Midwestern grocery conglomerate. While working there, she became outraged by what was known as the bucket shop. Illegitimate, high-rate loan operations that preyed on the hard times of the lesser paid. While looking for a way to help the economically depressed, Louise heard of the crusade of Boston merchant Edward Filene to establish credit unions. Louise saw this reform movement as a way to stop the rich from getting richer and the poor from getting poorer. Her own initiative led her to correspond with Filene and to organize 13 credit unions within the Kroger Company. At the time, the recommended maximum size for a credit union was 500 members. The reason was simple. You have to remember, Louise once said, that we didn't have data processing or many mechanical bookkeeping machines. 500 members was the maximum number any one volunteer could handle. A large company with 2,000 employees, therefore, would need at least 4 credit unions. Filene had hired New Hampshire attorney Roy Bergengren in 1929 to assist in organizing the credit union movement. But by 1933, he realized he couldn't continue to finance the venture alone. The answer was a unified, national, member-owned financial effort. Throughout 1933 and 1934, both he and Bergengren gave a whirlwind lecture tour to encourage activists to attend a meeting in Estes Park, Colorado, and form a national association of credit unions. Louise was determined that she would attend the conference. She often recalled Bergengren confessing that he had never been so mad in his life that the great Kroger Company would send a mere kid to represent them at such an important meeting. By August 12, 1934, 52 delegates had approved a constitution, and the Credit Union National Association was born. 6 weeks after returning from Estes Park, Louise and 24 others met in Columbus to ratify the Credit Union National Association's constitution and bylaws and to organize a centralized state body to be known as the OhioCreditUnionLeague. One of their first efforts was to unanimously elect Louise to represent Ohio on the new CUNA board. Throughout 1935, she traveled Ohio organizing credit unions.
I remember the first credit union I organized, the Brotherhood of Railway Clerks. I knew nothing about really organizing credit unions, so I spent the entire meeting reading the bylaws and explaining the movement's history. I was never paid for organizing credit unions. I personally felt it was a privilege.
It's estimated that Louise was involved in starting nearly 500 credit cooperatives. Over the next several years, the tales of her organizational efforts became legendary. There are documented cases telling of her founding credit unions in men's washrooms. She faced the adversity of anti-labor factions, yet managed to overcome their objections by explaining the nature of credit cooperatives. She was so committed to her mission that she literally lived out of the back seat of her car so she could be at the gates of factories when work shifts changed. The growth of the Ohio League, however, soon required a full-time managing director, and Louise was hired for the job. Claude Clark, a respected Cleveland attorney and later chairman of CUNA, wrote, "On October 12, 1936, the treasurer's report showed there was only $612 on hand. This, of course, was inadequate to carry on as planned. Our new managing director was not to be daunted by such a small matter as lack of funds, and showed her courageous spirit as well as her confidence in the future of the league by going ahead regardless. Louise supplemented her income by working for the Ohio Division of Securities during the day and organizing credit unions evenings and on weekends. Louise's Irish determination to see the fledgling movement succeed is illustrated in a letter written to Clark on January 26, 1937, in the midst of Ohio's Great Flood.
Dear Mr. Clark, I was very sorry to have to call off my appointments in the northern part of the state. This is the most terrible thing I have ever been through. Many of our credit unions are underwater, and some are burned. The city is under martial law. We have opened up our home to flood refugees. They are asleep in the next room on the floor. My family has all worked day and night. Thousands of our credit union members have nothing left in the world except what they have on their backs. I have arranged with the banks to loan money to the credit unions, and I have secured the authority from the city manager to issue permits or automobiles used in getting money to them. We are under martial law, you know, and no one is allowed on the streets without permits. We have no light, water, and if this letter seems incoherent, it is because I am writing with one candle, and I am so tired I can hardly see. Will you call Beckwith at Cleveland Graphite, also Cleveland Telephone, and explain why I won't be at their meeting this week? I feel I must stay here and see these credit unions through.
The tragedy of these credit unions was soon equaled in Louise's private life. Following the floods, she experienced several devastating personal setbacks. The loss of her father, followed by the extended hospitalization and death of her mother, and the discovery that her younger sister had contracted tuberculosis. These personal crises led her to the brink of despair, which was only overcome through Clark's continued encouragement and her immersion in the movement. In 1939, Louise met and married an up-and-coming insurance executive, Arthur Herring. And in 1941, their first child, Karen, was born. Nearly 2 years later, Louise left the Ohio League to pursue a new full-time interest, homemaking and motherhood. During the next 10 years, Bill, Joe, Bob, and Kathy rounded out the Herring clan. As in her previous career, Louise became totally committed, meeting her family's needs and volunteering her time to the church with the same vital energy and dedication she had given to credit unions. Never allowing tradition to dictate her roles, Louise served in male-dominated capacities such as coach of the church youth organization's baseball, volleyball, and kickball teams. Ironically, it was the Ohio Division of Securities that brought Louise back to the credit union movement. 2 credit unions she'd founded, the Post and Time-Star, were experiencing problems she was asked to help correct. What she thought would be a 6-week job lasted 34 years. Throughout her life, Louise maintained a philosophical ideal she was unwilling to compromise. She adamantly believed that the young, the poor, and women were being overlooked as employable by industry.
All segments of the credit union movement give much pious lip service to getting youth, blacks, Indians, women, and the poor and near poor into the movement. But do we really mean it? Granted, some large credit unions are hiring people under 30, but most are not hiring them into positions of leadership. Too many people are retiring to the credit union movement instead of from it. Too many boards are male, white, and elderly.
She once said that today's credit unions face bigger challenges than those of the movement's early days.
For one, many of today's poor don't even believe in themselves. As groups, they have been more exploited by their fellow man than almost anyone in Filene's day. When people lose faith in themselves, they wait for the government to do something.
Those who knew her recall that she wasn't beyond chastising today's credit union leaders.
Too many of our people see their job as being 9 to 5. Most don't even know how the movement was started. You go to a board meeting, and the big question is, when does the cocktail hour begin? As a movement, we spend enough on booze to put hundreds of credit unions in business.
She especially believed that credit unions should work on the buddy system, sharing their skills, talents, education, materials, forms, and other resources to cut expenses.
What would it take to help a credit union run off some promotional materials? You take 1,000 sheets of paper, several people's imagination, willingness, time, and you're on your way to licking a major part of the problem.
Her strong conviction in this belief led her in the 1970s to convince CUNA Mutual to underwrite Cincinnati's credit union building, a model for credit union cooperative ventures. Even today, her own Communicating Arts Credit Union, the renamed Post-Time Star Credit Unions, and Cincinnati Central Credit Union share a new building and resources. The economically disadvantaged were her children and her challenge.
Our motivation boils down to a single ideal, that our poor must be provided more than just food, shelter, and clothing. They must be provided the most important thing a man can have, his own place in the sun.
At age 63, she organized a credit union to serve the economically deprived in a 19-county area. At the time of her death, she was enthusiastically involved in the Over the Rhine project, a Greater Cincinnati effort to provide opportunities, including low-cost financial services, to a severely depressed area. Over the years, the recognition for her dedication and service was endless. She was officially named the Mother of Credit Unions by the Ohio General Assembly. She became the third credit union person, behind Filene and Bergengren, and the second woman to be named to the Cooperative Hall of Fame. Among other awards, in 1986 she was inducted into the Ohio Women's Hall of Fame. Louise best told the credit union story because she lived it. Her children, her friends, and her work are her legacy to the movement. Roy Bergengren informally christened her Dynamite. Her 5 children called her Mom. And dozens of others remembered her as Coach. But to thousands of families whose lives were touched by her work, she will always be known as the true breath of life, the spirit that bore the Ohio credit union movement.
I am convinced that it is only through the cooperative movement that we can really accomplish the things that we want to accomplish. We have to make every person partake of his rewards so that he truly can believe in freedom and believe in democracy. You've got to believe that you can do more than you think you can do, and I think we can.